My entitled stepsister crashed my wedding and lied that I had a child with my ex, but I answered her jealous rage with a reckoning she never saw coming. My stepsister, whom I'll refer to as Amanda, a 26-year-old woman, arrived uninvited at my wedding last week, accompanied by a young boy I had never met. The relationship between Amanda and me, a 27-year-old woman, has always been fraught with tension, a dynamic that led us to sever communication as soon as we both left home for college. Our parents' marriage, which brought us together when we were in middle school, marked the beginning of a challenging chapter in my life. My biological father had left my mother when I was very young, effectively disappearing from our lives. Amanda's experience, however, was different. Her parents' divorce occurred only a couple of years before my mother met her father, and Amanda clung to the belief that my mother was an obstacle to her parents' reconciliation, despite their relationship having ended long before. This misconception fueled her resentment toward my mother, but her animosity toward me was even more pronounced, expressed through relentless hostility that colored our shared childhood. Our parents made earnest attempts to foster harmony between us, hoping to bridge the gap created by our clashing personalities. However, their efforts waned when it became clear that Amanda's disdain for me was unshakable. Growing up, her constant antagonism wore on my nerves, casting a shadow over our household. When I left for college, I felt an overwhelming sense of relief, grateful to escape the daily friction of living under the same roof as her. Our interactions were limited to obligatory family gatherings, holidays, birthdays, and the like, where we maintained a careful distance, exchanging only the bare minimum of words. This arrangement suited us both, allowing a fragile peace to settle over our strained relationship. Roughly a year ago, an unexpected request from my mother stirred the embers of our discordant past. She reached out to ask if I would consent to her using some of the remaining funds from my college account, money left untouched thanks to a scholarship I had earned, and a portion of my wedding fund to help finance Amanda's wedding. I was taken aback, as I had no knowledge of Amanda's engagement or even that she had a boyfriend. Our lack of communication meant I was entirely out of the loop regarding her life. After careful consideration, I declined, reasoning that those funds might be crucial for my own future. My mother accepted my decision without protest, simply noting that she needed my answer and ending the call. The matter slipped from my mind, and we never revisited it. It wasn't until recently that I learned the full repercussions of that decision. Amanda had been planning an extravagant wedding, one that far exceeded the financial resources her father was willing or able to provide. She had envisioned a grand affair, complete with a lavish venue and a designer wedding dress, all funded by our parents. Her father, my stepdad, had set aside a reasonable sum for her wedding, but Amanda's demands were exorbitant, threatening to deplete his savings. When he refused to bankroll her vision, she turned to my mother for support. Her own mother had already declined to contribute, citing a lack of funds, and my mother, unwilling to dip into my wedding fund without my permission, asked me for approval. My refusal meant that Amanda and her fiancé, unable to cover the costs themselves, were forced to cancel their wedding plans. The decision not to fund Amanda's wedding was not solely about money. My stepdad, a pragmatic man, had reservations about the stability of Amanda's relationship. She and her fiancé had been together for less than a year before their engagement, a timeline that raised doubts about the longevity of their commitment. His instincts proved correct when, just a few months later, her fiancé ended the engagement over a trivial dispute. Amanda was devastated, and she directed her anger at our parents, convinced that their refusal to finance her wedding had doomed her relationship. She believed that a marriage, sealed by the grandeur she had envisioned, would have prevented her fiancé from leaving. While she didn't cut ties with our parents, her financial dependence on them made that impractical. She made her bitterness abundantly clear, creating a palpable tension in their relationship. In contrast, my own engagement, which came a couple of months ago, marked a joyful milestone. My partner and I had been together for nearly 6 years, a relationship built on a foundation of mutual trust and shared goals. When I shared the news with my parents, they offered to cover the cost of our wedding, a gesture that reflected their confidence in our partnership. However, my fiancé and I had no desire for an elaborate celebration. We envisioned a modest, intimate ceremony, prioritizing simplicity over spectacle. We expressed our preference to save the funds for our future, a decision our parents respected. My mother transferred the entirety of my wedding fund to me, along with the remaining balance from my college fund. My stepdad, in a touching display of support, contributed an additional $10,000, giving us the freedom to use the money as we saw fit. While they wouldn't have objected to a grander wedding, we remained committed to our vision of a small, heartfelt event. Reflecting on these events, I realize how deeply our childhood dynamics shaped the trajectory of our lives. Amanda's resentment, rooted in her belief that my mother disrupted her family, set the stage for years of conflict. Her hostility wasn't just a reaction to our parents' marriage, it was a manifestation of her broader struggles with entitlement and unrealistic expectations. My refusal to share my funds, while perhaps cold in her eyes, was a boundary I set to protect my own future, a future I had worked diligently to secure. The scholarship I earned, the careful planning of my wedding, these were not gifts handed to me but the result of years of effort and discipline. Amanda's cancelled wedding, while unfortunate, was a consequence of her own choices. Her insistence on an opulent celebration, coupled with her brief relationship with her fiancé, made our parents' decision to withhold funding a reasonable one. Yet, her anger was directed not just at them but at me, as if my existence and my choices were the source of her misfortunes. This pattern of blame, so familiar from our childhood, resurfaced with a vengeance at my wedding, where her actions would cast a shadow over what should have been a day of unadulterated joy. The contrast between our weddings, hers unrealized, mine modest but meaningful, underscored the differences in our approaches to life. Where I sought stability and practicality, Amanda chased extravagance, unwilling to compromise or contribute to her own dreams. Her dependence on our parents, even as an adult, stood in stark contrast to my efforts to forge an independent path. My stepdad's generosity toward me was not a sign of favoritism but a recognition of my commitment to a relationship that had proven its strength over time. His refusal to fund Amanda's wedding was not a rejection of her but a stand against her unrealistic demands, a decision validated by the swift dissolution of her engagement. As I look back on these events, I grapple with a mix of emotions: relief at having moved beyond the daily conflicts of our youth, frustration at Amanda's persistent antagonism, and a lingering sadness for the sisterly bond we never formed. Our parents, despite their best efforts, could not bridge the chasm between us, and Amanda's actions at my wedding would only widen that divide. Yet, amidst the turmoil, I remain grateful for the support of my parents and the love of my husband, anchors that have steadied me through this storm. The events that unfolded at my wedding, which I'll detail further, would test my resilience and force me to confront the weight of Amanda's accusations and the ripple effects of her choices. I made the mistake of making a Facebook post a few weeks ago where I thanked everybody who was a part of the wedding in any capacity. Of course, I thank my parents for all their support, both financially and emotionally, and I mentioned both my parents, my mother and my stepfather, because in my head, they were my parents and have been ever since middle school. I don't consider Amanda my sister, but I do consider my stepdad as my dad. It was an emotional post, and a lot of people commented on it, which is how I think it showed up on Amanda's feed as well. She saw that post and presumably got mad because she realized that both our parents were helping me out with the wedding but refused to do the same for her in the past. She didn't do anything at the time, and we only found out exactly how pissed off she was on the day of my wedding. Unfortunately, she showed up at my wedding after the ceremony was over, thankfully, and we were just about to serve lunch. She walked into the venue with some random kid, who I later found out was her neighbor's son, came right up to me, and started screaming at me, accusing me of stealing her dream wedding. She screamed at me and said that she hoped I was happy now since I'd stolen not just her wedding but also her dad, who now preferred me over her. My husband was standing right beside me, and I was talking to a couple of my cousins when she started yelling at me, and soon enough, everybody was looking at us. My parents came to the rescue and told her to go away before they called the cops, so she decided that she was going to drop a bomb before she left. She looked at my husband and told him that she'd been keeping a secret for my sake for a really long time now, but she couldn't anymore. Then, she pushed the child forward and said that this child was apparently my son with my ex, and I'd given him up for adoption years ago. Now, my husband and I knew that it was not true, and my parents knew that it was not true, but the rest of the guests seemed to be a little scandalized when she said that. So, my parents actually had to kick her out while my husband and I explained that Amanda was just crazy and jealous and that she was coming up with lies to defame me. After we managed to pacify the guests, we got to lunch and cranked up the tunes so people would forget about this stupid incident. Once my husband and I got home, we sat down with my parents and his parents, and my parents explained everything that's happened in the past so we'd have context as to why Amanda was so furious. I thought that it was ridiculously childish of her to make such a big deal out of this, especially since I believe that my parents had valid and legitimate reasons to not want to pay for her wedding. First off, it was extremely expensive compared to mine. At least my husband and I had contributed to our own wedding and didn't expect our parents to cover all the expenses. Secondly, she hadn't even known her ex-fiancé for that long, while my husband and I had been together for a really long time, so my parents knew that it was serious with us. And, forgive me for being blunt, they knew that paying for our wedding wouldn't be a waste. So, I don't think that it's fair for her to compare my wedding with the one that she had in mind. My parents apologized for it, especially my stepdad, who was pretty embarrassed by what Amanda had done. We didn't blame them anyway because they weren't in control of the situation, and after we discussed it, everybody went home, and that was it. But the next day, I received a call from my mother where she told me that Amanda had apparently picked up the kid from her neighbor's house without even informing her and was now being charged with kidnapping. Amanda had called them in the morning to inform them about this and ask her dad for help with money to bail her out and to find a lawyer. It was ridiculous to me that she would go to such an extent just to humiliate me at my wedding because this was all a bit excessive. I did feel a little sorry for her, but I didn't think I owed her an apology. However, ever since she got arrested, her friends have been rallying for her and accusing me of being the bad guy. They seem to think that I'm the one to blame for all of this because apparently, they believe that my parents have always favored me and say that I'd always been the golden child. I always felt like our parents have treated us equally and have never favored one over the other. Both of us have always had equal opportunities, and I think it's a matter of who was able to make the most of what they had. So, the accusation of me being the golden child seems kind of unfair. We went to the same school, and after that, I really think I got a scholarship because I was a better student, which is why I had leftover money from my college fund. So, my parents had nothing to do with that. And I've been with my husband for a longer time than she was with her boyfriend, which is also not something that our parents could control. My stepdad has made it very clear to all of us that they would have definitely paid for his daughter's wedding, but she was being unreasonable at the time and was making insane demands that nobody in their right mind would agree to, which is why he backed out entirely. If she really wanted a wedding that badly, then she should have scaled down considerably or at least offered to cover some of the expenses herself along with her fiancé and his family. But she didn't do any of that and just stuck to her ridiculous demands, expecting our parents to do everything for her. The budget was crazy, and so was the fact that she was rushing to marry a guy who she hadn't even known for a year, and that's why our parents weren't on board with the idea of throwing away an exorbitant amount of money on her wedding. That's all. I don't think it's fair for anybody to blame me for her predicament right now, but yet her friends are. Initially, I thought that I wouldn't let it get to me, but it's been a week, and I still feel kind of guilty about everything. As far as I know, she's in a lot of trouble legally, and even though everybody's mad at her, my stepdad is trying his best to come to a settlement with the mother of the child whom she brought with her that day. My husband doesn't think that I have anything to feel sorry for, but I just do. Am I the asshole for taking money from my stepdad for my wedding and also posting about it online? I don't have anything to feel sorry about. Her friends were just doing what most friends do, trying to be there for her, and being there for her always meant putting me down and making me feel bad about myself. So, I'd say they did a pretty good job of it. I did feel horrible about everything for a while, but then I spoke about it to my mother and my stepdad, most importantly, and both of them said that this wasn't my fault. This was her acting crazy and now having to face the consequences for it. They advised me not to pay any mind to what her friends were saying, which was difficult for me because these were the people that I went to school with, and now all of them had turned against me. But there's nothing that I can do about it because clearly, they have picked which side they want to be on, and it's not mine. So, instead of fighting it and trying to justify myself to everybody, I should just know that I did nothing wrong and go on with my life. Even a couple of people here were accusing me of being their favorite and talking about how my parents had failed Amanda. Let me be clear, I did not give you guys a one-sided story, and I made sure to include even the things that I'd said, the time where I refused to share my funds with her, which is why she couldn't get married since my mother also refused to contribute. That was selfish of me, but to be fair, she'd never tried to be my friend and had always been horrible to me while we were growing up, so I didn't see any reason for me to be nice to her. There were a couple of times when even I would retaliate and be mean to her or make rude comments about her, and our parents would scold both of us for doing that to each other. If I was their favorite child, then they wouldn't have said anything to me. And if we're just talking about the wedding, then I already explained how I got the money for it and why she didn't get the same treatment. She didn't bother to think about our parents and wanted a larger-than-life wedding for herself without spending anything from her own pockets. Amanda, my stepsister, should consider herself fortunate that our parents, despite their limited means, continue to provide her with financial support. At 26, she holds a job, but her lack of dedication has left her stagnating in the same role for years. Her lifestyle, marked by a preference for extravagance, far exceeds her modest income, rendering her unable to sustain herself without frequent loans from our parents. This reliance has become a pattern, with Amanda borrowing money almost every other month, yet she remains ungrateful, expecting our parents to fund her every whim. Last year, she envisioned an opulent wedding, one that would have drained our parents' savings. When they declined, citing entirely reasonable concerns, she cast herself as the victim, revealing a profound lack of appreciation for their ongoing support. Despite her actions, my stepfather remains steadfast in his efforts to protect her, even now, as he navigates the fallout of her recent choices. Amanda's friends, however, paint a distorted picture, accusing our parents of unfair treatment and favoritism toward me. This narrative stings, as it dismisses the years of hard work I've invested in building an independent life. From high school through college, I dedicated myself to my studies, earning a scholarship that preserved my college fund and allowed me to plan for my future. Now, in my career, I continue to prioritize diligence and self-reliance, freeing me from the need to lean on our parents for financial support. Amanda had access to the same opportunities, the same parental encouragement, yet she chose a different path. The accusation that I am the golden child feels like an unjust attempt to undermine my efforts and rewrite our family story. Ultimately, I know the truth of my actions and the character of our parents. While Amanda's friends hurl accusations of bias, my stepfather's primary concern remains her well-being, a testament to his unwavering commitment as a parent. This contrast speaks volumes about the dynamics at play. It's disheartening that Amanda, despite the sacrifices made on her behalf, refuses to acknowledge our parents' generosity, choosing instead to portray herself as a victim seeking sympathy. Her behavior, to me, is not just disappointing but deeply frustrating, as it dismisses the love and effort poured into her. The resolution of Amanda's recent legal troubles further illustrates this dynamic. My stepfather reached a settlement with the mother of the child Amanda involved in her wedding outburst, agreeing to pay $25,000 to have the charges dropped. This was no small feat, the sum was substantial, and while he offered to pay in installments, the mother insisted on receiving it up front. Despite the financial strain, my stepfather managed to fulfill this obligation, securing Amanda's freedom. Yet, her response has been nothing short of callous. She has not once reached out to thank him, a fact that has left my mother furious and deeply hurt. Days have passed since the settlement, and Amanda's silence speaks louder than any words could, revealing a selfishness that I find almost incomprehensible. My mother confided that my stepfather, though stoic, is quietly devastated by Amanda's ingratitude. He has always been a pillar of strength for our family, a man who has treated me with the same care as his own daughter. Knowing that he is hurting weighs heavily on me. My husband and I are set to depart for our honeymoon in 2 days, but we've decided to visit my family first, to ensure my stepfather is coping. He is a good man, deserving of a daughter who values his sacrifices, and I want to be there for him in a way Amanda has not. This visit feels like a small but necessary gesture to affirm the bond I share with him, one built on mutual respect rather than obligation. On a brighter note, the storm of accusations from Amanda's friends has subsided. Their claims that our parents favored me over her have quieted, perhaps because the truth of their exaggeration has become undeniable. In the heat of the moment, I wished I had confronted their falsehoods, but the social media posts fueling their narrative have vanished, leaving no outlet for my response. I've come to accept that engaging with their accusations might have been futile, especially in the glow of my recent marriage. I chose to prioritize my happiness, to savor the early days of this new chapter with my husband, rather than wade into the drama. Yet, I know Amanda's story is far from over. She is likely to resurface with new grievances, and when she does, her friends will rally behind her once more. This time, I won't remain silent. I refrained from responding before, partly because it felt wrong to attack her at her lowest and partly because my parents were consumed with worry for her. But should she cross a line again, I will stand my ground, confident that our parents will support my decision to defend myself. Reflecting on these events, I find myself grappling with the complexities of our family's history. Amanda's resentment, rooted in her childhood belief that my mother disrupted her family, has festered into a pattern of entitlement and blame. Her inability to take responsibility for her choices, whether in her career, her finances, or her relationships, has led her to this point, where her actions have legal and emotional consequences. Yet, my stepfather's unwavering support, even in the face of her ingratitude, underscores the depth of his love. It's a love I've come to appreciate deeply, especially as I contrast it with Amanda's refusal to acknowledge it. My own journey, marked by hard work and a commitment to independence, stands in stark relief to her path. I earned my scholarship through dedication, built a stable relationship over years, and planned a modest wedding that reflected my values. These were not handouts but the fruits of my labor, and I refuse to let accusations of favoritism diminish that. The settlement with the child's mother, while costly, was a testament to my stepfather's character. $25,000 is no small sum, and the emotional toll of navigating such a crisis cannot be understated. I imagine the stress of those negotiations, the delicate balance of protecting Amanda while addressing the harm she caused. My stepfather's willingness to shoulder this burden, despite Amanda's lack of gratitude, speaks to his integrity. My mother's anger, shared in our recent conversation, reflects not just frustration with Amanda but a deeper pain for her husband, who is given so much only to be met with indifference. As I prepare for my honeymoon, I carry this knowledge with me, a reminder of the family I cherish and the values I hold dear. Amanda's declaration, made while I was on my honeymoon, That she has severed ties with our family marks a new chapter in this saga. I learned of her public social media announcement only upon my return, as I had deliberately disconnected from the digital world to focus on my new life with my husband. The news, while unsurprising, carries a weight I hadn't anticipated. Her decision to cut us off feels like the culmination of years of resentment, a final act of defiance against a family she perceives as having failed her. Yet, I can't help but wonder if this choice, like so many before it, is another attempt to cast herself as the victim. Her announcement, made without warning or discussion, underscores the distance between us, a chasm that has only widened with time. As I move forward, I'm determined to focus on the life I've built, grounded in love and mutual respect with my husband and our parents. Amanda's actions, while disruptive, cannot overshadow the joy of my recent marriage or the strength of the family that supports me. My stepfather's resilience, my mother's unwavering loyalty, and my husband's steadfast presence are the anchors that keep me grounded. While Amanda's story may continue to unfold, with its inevitable twists and turns, I'm resolved to meet it with clarity and conviction, no longer allowing her narrative to cast a shadow over my own.